Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Hi, this is Celine Williams hosting from Ontario for Canada's podcast. My guest today is Emily O'Brien, founder and CEO of Comeback Snacks. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you so much.
I'm excited to chat with you today and get to know more about you. And because what we do is we tell the story of entrepreneurs here, I'd love to know a little bit about your background and your journey to, Comeback Snacks and where you're at today.
Yes, thanks so much. So I would say my journey to Comeback Snacks was slightly unconventional.
We love an unconventional journey. That's what makes life interesting.
I actually started my company when I was incarcerated in federal prison. And this was in 2018, actually. And I started it with popcorn kernels and some stamps.
Popcorn. Okay. So how do we go from popcorn kernel? First of all, I'm really curious about popcorn kernels and stamps as a starting point. So I'm going to ask you about that. But also, how do we go from popcorn kernels and stamps to what Comeback Snacks is today?
Absolutely. So when I was incarcerated, I got mixed up just with a bad group of people. I ended up in prison. I was an honor roll student, always had jobs, so it can happen to anyone. But
Absolutely.
I also had some reparations that I had to do. And so when I was in prison, I knew that I could kind of make things better, but I also wanted to make them better for other people because I've always been compassionate, and I felt very misunderstood on, why I was in there. And also I felt very stigmatized as to my capabilities after prison. And so popcorn was a popular prison snack. And it was also this blank canvas where people could create and use their own recipes. And throughout those creation of recipes, we would have discussions about, what we're going to do after and for employment specifically. And we knew that it was going to be tough based on the challenges of getting a job with a record. And so popcorn, something that we shared, something that we also shared was a record. And I knew that I had a bit of an entrepreneurial past. I had a small social media company prior to that. I decided to start a popcorn company in prison where I could employ myself and others after incarceration.
So I love obviously being in prison. This is not a positive thing. I'm not saying I love that aspect of it, but I do love the positive community and connection that comes from something that is challenging, right? Yes. I think that's not easy, obviously. And there was clearly an opportunity for something bigger, for possibility, which I think can be really hard in challenging circumstances to see that there's anything possible, right? Absolutely. It becomes the weight. So I love that you focused on that and that this has become it's a real business. It's a big deal. It's a really cool business.
Thank you.
It is. So I'm curious, the transition from starting it while you were incarcerated to bringing it out of that system, because and I might have misunderstood this, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But what that was like and how that went for you, because my guess is that there's very specific challenges and differences, right, in a system outside of the system that come with taking this business idea and putting it in another world, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Absolutely. And so kind of what I did, I started to build the brand from the inside. So I would kind of take all the negative things that were said about me and others, like our slogan is now popcorn so good it's criminal, made with conviction, kind of bringing power back.
For the record, I just need to note this. I really enjoy a little bit snarky tagline that's also true. So I'm very into that.
Thank you so much. And in there, I read 82 books. I started to realize that prison reform was something that was happening as I was in there. If I was in 10, 15 years ago, no one would have given a crap. So I kind of hate to say it, but I was actually in prison at the perfect time because I had, I was at a point in my life where I was ready to take responsibility for some of the struggles that I'd gone through. My weakness was substances. I went through a very difficult time with that. And that was part of the reason why I was in there. And but I also knew that, yeah, prison reform was something that people were starting to care about. And so I would write articles and mail them out. And my business partner would post them online. I would write letters to authors who had written books that I read. I started forming relationships with volunteers that would come in and, they would bring in crafts and stuff. So I started to make these connections with the outside community while I was still inside. And then when I got out, I had to live in a halfway house, which is fine. It's part of the
Yep.
I guess, re-entry process. And so I started in that kitchen, and then I moved to my mom's kitchen. I actually shared my story with the media. And this is in the very beginning because I was like, no one's going to own this story but me. And I was at a point where I was like, I know that I have a responsibility to be accountable for things that had happened because no one else is going to do it for you. But also I didn't want to suppress what had happened because I couldn't live with this secret inside of me that someone else could just take charge of. And so that was another part of it. And pretty soon we'd gotten into a commercial kitchen. And then as the story started to spread, tremendous support from the community started to come in. So people would be like, oh, do you want a table at this event? You want to come talk in my class? I'm here. People would donate labels, like print companies donate labels. And someone bought us a popcorn popper. Someone gave us like $500 donation for marketing. Right. So I like to say it was a community built business. And so since then, now it's 2023, we went from, being at markets in a couple stores to we're in over 800 stores now, and we're all across the country. But most importantly, at least for me, is that we've made significant changes surrounding reintegration at the federal and provincial level with government.
So I'd like to, if you're okay with it, I'd like to know a little bit more about that, because I think that impact, anytime any business can have that kind of positive impact, especially when it comes to, there's the very, very specific stigma, and I hate the word, but there's stigma and shame around incarceration, around people coming back into society. It is, as you said, it's really hard to get a job, to find employment when you have any kind of record. And I think that I think it's incredible to be able to make change and have an impact on something that people don't like to talk about, because we don't like to talk about these things. It's just that dark corner we push things into. So I'd love to know a little bit more about the impact that you've had in that way, because I recognize that the social enterprise aspect of this is clearly very important to you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The lived experience for sure, because we never think it can happen to us until it does. And I like to call it the proximity of forgiveness. It's very easy to forgive someone that you know and someone that you care about. The second you read about someone else doing it who you have no idea, and all you read about is how bad they were, you have this instant hate, right? And that's kind of like the gift and the curse of the media as well. It's like they can either spin you one way or the other way. And so I made sure that, coming up with this story, like they got to know the real me. I was like, this isn't just like, oh, Emily got arrested and put in jail. This was my life growing up, and this is how it happened. So I could actually help people. And because the story was told in that way, I was contacted by families and kids of parents that were struggling, and people all around the world that were like, thank you for helping me in this way. They didn't necessarily go to prison, but it's all about making mistakes, but also making a comeback. We've all done things that we regret, but in order to make that comeback, we need help, but we also have to take responsibility for ourselves as well.
And there's not, I think that in the past few years, there's been some wonderful, like Brene Brown comes to mind, wonderful work around speaking about vulnerability and shame and things like that. And I think that is incredibly important. But I think a lot of people still talk about it from a theoretical, intellectual standpoint, don't actually take the time to be vulnerable and share the aspects of their story that have that impact. And what I hear inside of what you just said is by you sharing your story and by you opening up and just owning it, right? Like I can write my own story. I can share it in my own way. That impact is tremendous. It does literally changes people's lives.
Mm-hmm. And that's like what I like to call emotional profit too. I find it's an essential component of running. I think in running a sustainable business, it's like you have to be invested in the work that you do, not just the profit that you make. And so when you can actually see people's lives changing, like this came, like, I think I was always like, I think we're all good people, right? I think we all see value in helping others because we've all needed it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So doing that and working with people, and even you can help people in this, what we think is the smallest thing. It could be a text message. It can be connecting them to a resource, or connecting someone to an employer, or telling them like they look great, or like you did this awesome, right? You can really change. You don't have to do these grandiose gestures where you're responsible for their entire life. You can actually help people in small ways that actually get them on the right, on a different path that can really serve as a springboard to the next chapter of their life.
So I'm curious. So you are an entrepreneur who has run more than one business, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious what are some of the lessons you learned either with your previous business that you were like, this does not work with this business, or that you carried through, or things that looking back, you're like, these are the things that really stand out as what I learned as an entrepreneur about myself or this journey or running a business or anything in that realm?
I think is that everyone has something to offer. That's why I think working with people that had records, for example, it's like, no, you don't look at the record, you look at what they're capable of doing. And the more that you can actually build a family environment, I think that actually makes people feel comfortable and make people want to actually continue to work with you. And there's so many sayings out there. It's like, be a boss and all that stuff. It's like, no, I don't want to be that. I want to be a friend, but also someone that can help build others up. And I think there's a lot of these like sayings these days that actually don't make sense in entrepreneurship, right? Like fake it till you make it is another one. That doesn't work out well. And being your own boss and making your own schedule. And no, it's if you're actually there to serve who you're intending to serve, people are your boss, right? People are telling you how they need to be helped. Or, in the food space, for example, where we are now, it's like, I'm not going to make the flavor that I like. It's like you're going to make flavors that the public want, that will make them happy, or like suit their palate, so that they want to share, that tastes good, right? So it's not actually all about you. It's about everyone else.
There's a real misrepresentation, I think, oftentimes in entrepreneurship, of the idea that you're this like lone wolf or solo island doing everything on your own. And a lot of entrepreneurs get really stuck in that because there's a lot of language around it, right? Like there's kind of two paths. It's either, no one does this on their own and it's all about the community, which is a wonderful thing, but there's a lot more loud voices that are all about, that, like the Steve Jobs, the solo founder. And he's not that he was a solo founder, but we focus on like a solo founder and what they can do on their own and how it's one person's vision. And there's a lot of that people model or look to in entrepreneurship. And I think what you're saying is so important, is that it is about the people around you. And when you have an eye on serving and service, not only, I think it feels better personally from a totally selfish, it feels nice to have that impact, to care about people, but also what you can do, not doing it on your own, thinking of other people. It's a really great thing because we're always in our own heads. That's that gets boring at a certain point, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that I've learned is like, never like lose really who you are, right? I mean, if I could do a speaking engagement, sometimes I'm going to curse. That's just it. Like, I'm sorry. We all swear, right? Yeah. Like if we're getting arrested, you would swear too. So I'm not going to pretend to be all polished and stuff for that time, because that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think just being true to, and I'm not going to, sure, I can like wear a collared shirt, and I like collared shirts, but sometimes I want to wear a t-shirt and jeans. And if I'm talking in front of a group of kids, Or even if I'm talking in front of a group of executives, I'm still going to wear sneakers because that's how I feel comfortable. Right. So, I think, yeah, definitely not losing who you are, just trying to like please other people, because there are so many people out there that you can help. And if people are giving you rules on being yourself, then that's not the right fit.
But then that's not you being yourself, right?
Exactly.
Like that's that.
Yeah. I understand swear. Like, okay, I understand. Yeah. Maybe don't curse all the time. But if you're not allowed to, if everything is parental advisory, then no, like that's not, my story is not suited for that.
Yes.
Like there are substances, there is swearing, there is, there's abuse, there is a bunch of things that I can't help people if I can't share exactly how that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I think that's where it's so important to, and I, Emily, we have just met. So I'm saying this with something that I see in you is the ability to adapt without losing yourself. And I think often people don't adapt. They entirely change who they are for specific situations and actually lose the core, maybe not the story, but the core of who they are. Whereas I think being confident in that core and being able to adapt the external factors. So like, yeah, maybe you don't curse in front of a group of kids.
Yeah.
Okay. Like that's an adaptation that I can work with because that feels appropriate and I can still be me inside of it. But to then like never curse in any time in front of people, if that's how you speak, that kind of change with a group of adults is really different. Like you can lose that core of who you are because you're trying to think about like, I can't be this person that is real.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way of putting it. Thank you for helping me. There we go. Helping each other. Love that.
That's what it's all about. So I'm curious. I have two things that I'm going to ask. So I'm going to ask this first. I'm curious when you look at the future, when you look at the future of Comeback Snacks, and let's say this, amazing that you're in 800 locations. Like kudos to you. That's phenomenal. When you look at the future of Comeback Snacks, and it may not even be I'm not necessarily saying like we want to be in this many stores, but the impact that you want it to have, because there is such a clear social aspect to it. What do you see as the potential for the future?
I see us developing grant programs to give out grants to people trying to start businesses that maybe have coming out of prison or have a record. Even starting a business, that's like a whole other discussion. With a record was challenging because, there was a financial institution that didn't want to open a bank account for me because I was hiring people with records. And then like the business insurance is like at premiums. And then there's grants that we applied to that actually there was like a break in the communication because we'd have these grant organizations reaching out to us to apply. And they didn't even read the fine print at the end that said, oh, actually, if you have a record, you're ineligible. Right. So it's like, what does that have to do with that thing? So I just saw like all these gaps. And I eventually want to be able to fund other businesses and travel around the world and see how we can bring the world closer together despite how vast it is. Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. The other question that I had, and it was, a little bit inside of what you were talking about, but the changes that you've been able to impact or be a part of the discussion around the prison system you said at the federal and the provincial level. What are some of those changes or conversations that you've had that you think that you feel, I'm going to say most proud of, because I don't know a better word for it, but where you're like, I'm really glad we're doing this, or these things are changing, or something is not the way it was before?
Yeah. So when I was charged, there was a number of circumstances that led to me being arrested for, I'm just going to say, drug smuggling.
Mm-hmm.
I was never a drug smuggler. I never went to university for that. Like I just ended up on a trip with someone that I trusted and back in Canada because I just wanted to go home with drugs on me. Meanwhile, at the time, federal government had something called mandatory minimum sentences. And so you're putting women who are used as drug mules, who have no other recourse or very few recourses or just very, very ignorant, and try to get home. And are arrested and are put in jail for a very long period of time when they aren't the ones benefiting from this drug trade. And the people higher up, like we were like the lowest hanging fruit. So the country is spending like millions of tax dollars on incarcerating women who have no idea what kind of world they're in. And then putting them back out into the world with no support. And then they wonder why there's all this reoffending. And so I worked with the federal government on the federal framework to reduce recidivism. And so we actually got that law changed. So now judges have control. The mandatory minimums don't exist for these drug smuggling charges. There are other charges that they still do for, very good reason.
Yep.
But often, for the most part, the majority of women involved in the drug trade are marginalized and have suffered tremendous abuse and are also mothers. And so there's just so many factors that led to, petitioning to change this law, which was changed last year, which is great. And with the Ministry of Labor, so at the provincial level, this was more about after incarceration. So I would say it's not prison reform, but it's about equal opportunity employment. And so the Ministry of Labor, I work with Monty McNaughton. He just came out with a fund called the Skills Development Fund, and it's like I think it's an almost $12 million fund that is allocated towards businesses that want to hire and are going to invest in hiring people coming out of incarceration.
That's amazing. Like, that's huge. Congratulations to you. And also thank you for sharing that, because I guarantee we have many listeners who did not know about the mandatory minimums that existed or continue to exist in other ways, and did not, would never have, and I hate to say this, but would never have considered the possibility of hiring someone who is coming out of the system, or what that could look like, or that there are programs designed to encourage it, because, equal opportunity matters in all the ways. So, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah. I was just listening to you.
So I appreciate you sharing that, because I think awareness matters for things like this. And I think that speaking to some of the changes that have occurred and may continue to occur opens up opportunity for everyone, right? Whether it's a business owner or company looking to hire someone, or someone looking for a job, or, of wanting to change their future in some way.
And it's like when you have nothing left to lose, like you become the strongest fighter. When all you can do is fight. Right. And so instead of, I think often, like right now in the workplace, there's like kind of a sense of entitlement in certain areas. So when you come out of prison, you are just like, I'm going to work so hard because I want to see my kids again. I want to have a place to live again. I want to feel proud of myself again. I want to put my kids through university, or I want to put myself through school or something like that. Right. It's like, I want to feel human again. And when you have that feeling, when you want to feel that again, you'll fight till the death pretty much.
I think it's really interesting. One of the things that you just said inside of there is that idea of wanting to feel human again. I think that's really important, because it almost goes back to what you were, something you mentioned earlier around the family environment. And that's that, like, to me, what I hear is, just because of the work that I do around psychological safety, right? When we feel safe, we feel human. And that's a really basic thing that everyone should be able to feel safe and human. And and I don't mean to downplay this, but this seems like a very obvious way to have some of that help happen for people who otherwise might not. First of all, we're probably not feeling human inside the system. And we can change that.
Absolutely. Because it says like it's going to be hard to change from the prison system from inside. So like, luckily the government is helping to change it. The people inside are helping to change it. I know countless people that have also been incarcerated that are doing amazing things now, and are working alongside other people that are working, like moving towards that same goal. You see it down in the States everywhere, and now it's finally starting to make an impact.
Yeah. I think that's incredible. I really want to thank you for sitting and chatting with me and sharing your story and sharing some of the like unbelievably amazing work that you're doing and impact you're having. And you have a really cool company that, you know, makes popcorn that everyone should go try because popcorn's awesome. And a really great story behind it. So like, and I mean this, thank you for coming and sharing all of this and being so open. And educating folks, including myself, about some of the realities of these things. Because again, not enough people, in my opinion, are talking about it.
Well, thank you so, so much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. So for those who are listening, you can check out Emily and her work at comebacksnacks.com. And she's also on Instagram at comebacksnacks. And thank you for listening to Canada's podcast. Like, comment, and subscribe to all our channels to get the latest podcasts from entrepreneurs across Canada.